We just didn't like her anymore. They say that promises made in the dark are the easiest to break, but the pact we made under the fluorescent hum of a gas station parking lot light was the only thing I ever kept true. We promised to be best friends forever. We swore it on our lives, pinky fingers interlocked, giggling over slushies that stained our tongues neon blue. But forever has a shelf life in Star City, West Virginia. Forever ended exactly at midnight on a humid July Friday, the moment the metal of a kitchen knife met the warmth of a beating heart. I still wake up screaming, not because of the blood, though God there was so much of it, but because of the smell. It's a specific cloying cocktail of cheap vanilla body spray and raw copper-scented iron that coats the back of my throat every time I try to swallow the guilt. I see her sometimes. Kylie. Not the way she looked in the yearbook, smiling with braces and full of naive hope, but the way she looked in my bedroom mirror 3 nights ago. I was brushing my hair, the bristles scraping against my scalp, when the reflection shifted. Behind me, standing in the shadow cast by my heavy oak wardrobe, was a figure wearing a gray hoodie. The fabric was stained, dark, wet patches expanding across the chest like blooming black roses. I froze, the brush clattering to the floor. "It's just a shadow," I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling. "It's just the way the street lamp hits the tree outside." I forced myself to turn around, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The corner was empty, just dust motes dancing in the pale light. But the air was freezing, a localized pocket of winter in the middle of a sweltering summer, and I could hear it, faintly, a wet rattling sound. Gurgle, gurgle. The sound of lungs trying to pull oxygen through a throat that no longer works. I told myself it was the house settling the old pipes, groaning in the walls. I told myself I was tired, but deep down I knew. The dead don't leave, they just wait for you to be quiet enough to hear them. To understand why a girl who spent her Sundays in the church choir could end up washing her best friend's blood off her hands in a creek, you have to understand Star City. It's the kind of place where the silence is heavy, pressing in on you from the dense rolling forests of the Appalachians that surround us. There is nothing to do here but drive. We drove circles around the town, burned gas, just to feel like we were moving, like we weren't stuck in the same loop of mediocrity that trapped our parents. We were the Trinity. Sierra, Kylie, and me, Riley. We were supposed to be inseparable. Sierra was the sun we all orbited, beautiful, charismatic, with a wild streak that felt dangerous and intoxicating. I was the moon reflecting her light, desperate to be close to her, to be chosen by her. And Kylie was the earth, solid, loyal, grounded. She was the one who remembered birthdays, the one who covered for us when we snuck out, the one who loved us with a ferocity that ultimately killed her. But triangles are the most unstable shapes in geometry. One angle always gets sharpened while the other's dull. It started slowly, a cancer in the friendship that metastasized over months of shared glances and whispered jokes that Kylie wasn't privy to. Sierra and I began to drift into a world of our own, a darker orbit where Kylie's loyalty felt like a leash. She became annoying to us. Her laugh was too loud, her texts were too frequent, her need for validation was exhausting. It wasn't a sudden hatred, it was a slow drip poison. We stopped inviting her to the cool parties. We made plans right in front of her and then claimed we forgot to tell her. We were cruel in the way only teenage girls can be surgical with our exclusion. The idea didn't start with a scream. It started with a whisper in honors math. The teacher was droning on about quadratic equations, chalk dust floating in the stale classroom air. Sierra passed me a folded note, the edges crisp. I opened it under my desk, expecting a joke about the teacher's toupee. Instead, in her looping, bubbly handwriting were 3 words: "We should do it." I didn't have to ask what it was. We had joked about it for weeks, a dark humor that spiraled out of control. "Life would be so much easier without her," Sierra had said once while we were smoking weed in her car watching the rain blur the windshield. "She knows too much, she's a liability." It should have been terrifying. The thought of ending a human life, a life we had shared sleepovers and secrets with, should have made me vomit. But looking at Sierra across the classroom, seeing the cold, flat determination in her blue eyes, I felt something else. I felt a thrill, a sick electric current of power. We were gods deciding the fate of a mortal. "Okay," I mouthed back. And just like that, the universe shifted. The abstract became concrete. The joke became a plan. The days leading up to July 6th were a blur of normalcy that felt performative. I went to school. I ate dinner with my parents, cutting my meatloaf while my dad asked about my grades, all while knowing I had a hunting knife wrapped in a towel under my mattress. I looked at my hands and wondered if they looked like killers' hands. They looked so small, so manicured. I wondered how much force it would take to push a blade through skin. I practiced the motion in the air when I was alone in the shower, the water masking my tears. I wasn't crying for Kylie. I was crying for the loss of my own innocence, grieving the girl I was about to murder alongside her. July 6th arrived with a suffocating heat wave. The air was thick enough to chew, humid and heavy with the scent of pine and exhaust fumes. I spent the day in a fugue state, checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for the signal. Sierra was calm, terrifyingly calm. She texted me about nail polish colors and a boy she thought was cute, inserting emojis as if we weren't counting down the hours to an execution. Kylie had been texting us, too desperate for connection. We had iced her out for days, and she was frantic to fix whatever she thought she had broken. That was the tragedy of Kylie. She thought if she just loved us harder, we would love her back. She didn't realize that her love was the very thing that made us want to destroy her. It was too heavy. It demanded too much. "Pick you up at 11:30. Be ready." Sierra's text finally came. The screen of my phone glowed in the darkness of my room, a beacon of doom. I dressed methodically. I chose dark clothes not because I was trying to look like a movie villain, but because I didn't want the stains to show. I pulled on a baggy gray hoodie despite the heat. It was armor. It was a hiding place. I slipped the knife into the front pocket. The weight of it was shocking. It dragged the fabric down, bumping against my stomach with every step. It felt cold, alien, a foreign object that didn't belong in my world of lip gloss and textbooks. Sneaking out was a ritual we had perfected years ago. I stuffed pillows under my duvet to mimic the shape of a sleeping body. A cliché, I know, but clichés exist because they work. I opened my window, the screen popping out with a familiar thwack that sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the house. I froze, waiting for my dad's footsteps, for the creak of the hallway floorboards. Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the rhythmic breathing of the house. I climbed out onto the trellis, the wood rough against my palms, and dropped into the rhododendron bushes below. The smell of the damp earth hit me, a foreshadowing of where we were going. Sierra was waiting down the street, her silver sedan idling with the lights off. It looked like a shark in the moonlight, sleek and predatory. I opened the passenger door and slid in. The AC was blasting, freezing the sweat on my forehead instantly. Sierra didn't look at me. She was staring straight ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2. She looked beautiful in the pale dashboard light, her profile sharp and perfect. "You have it?" she asked, her voice devoid of inflection. I patted my hoodie pocket. The metal clunked against my hip. "Yeah, good." She put the car in drive, the engine purring. "Let's go get her." We drove through the sleeping streets of Star City. The houses were dark, blind eyes turned away from our sins. I watched the streetlights flicker past, counting them to calm my racing heart. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. My stomach was churning a mix of nausea and adrenaline that tasted like bile. I wanted to tell Sierra to stop. I wanted to open the door and roll out onto the asphalt, to run back to my bed and wake up from this nightmare. But I couldn't. Sierra's gravity was too strong. Disappointing her was a fate worse than murder. We pulled up to Kylie's apartment complex a few minutes before midnight. It was a brick building unremarkable in every way, the kind of place you pass 1,000 times without seeing. Sierra killed the headlights but kept the engine running. She pulled out her phone. "We're outside. Come on." I watched the third-floor window. A moment later, the light flickered off. Then the screen popped out. Kylie emerged, climbing down the fire escape with the agility of someone who had done this 100 times before. She looked small from down here, fragile. She was wearing a hoodie too pink and cheerful, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked so alive. It felt impossible that in less than an hour she would just be matter, organic waste decomposing in the dirt. She hopped into the back seat, bringing a gust of humid night air and the scent of vanilla with her. "Hey, guys," she chirped, her voice breathless and eager. She leaned forward between the front seats, her face glowing with relief. "I'm so glad you texted. I thought you guys were mad at me or something. I've been freaking out all week." Sierra smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It didn't reach her eyes. It was a mask, a muscle contraction she had perfected to manipulate the world. "Don't be silly, Kai. We've just been busy. We missed you." "I missed you too," Kylie said, settling back into the seat. "Where are we going, just driving?" "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding tinny and far away like I was speaking through a long tube. "Just driving. Maybe head up to the woods to smoke." "Perfect," Kylie said. "I stole a pack of cigarettes from my mom's purse." The car pulled away from the curb, tires crunching on gravel. Sierra turned up the radio. It was some generic pop song, a bass-heavy track about falling in love in the club. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. We were listening to party music on our way to a funeral. Kylie was singing along in the back seat, tapping her fingers against the window. She was completely at ease. She trusted us. She trusted us with her secrets, with her fears, and tonight she was trusting us with her life. That trust felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. We drove out of the city limits, past the last gas station, past the dilapidated barns and the fields of corn that whispered in the wind. The road narrowed the asphalt, giving way to cracked pavement and then to dirt. The trees closed in around us, a tunnel of black branches that seemed to swallow the headlights. This was Blackwood territory. The woods here were old, ancient things that didn't care about human morality. "My phone is dying," Kylie complained from the back. "Does anyone have a charger?" "In the glove box," Sierra said, her eyes fixed on the winding road. Kylie reached forward, her hand brushing my shoulder. I flinched, recoiling as if she had burned me. "Whoa, jumpy much," Kylie laughed. "Sorry, Riley." "It's fine," I snapped, too harsh. "Just startled me." "You okay?" Kylie asked, her voice softening with concern. "You seem tense." I closed my eyes. "You seem tense." She was worried about me. She was about to die, and she was worried about me being tense. Tears pricked at my eyelids, hot and stinging. "I'm fine, Kylie, just tired." "We can go home early if you want," she offered. "No," Sierra cut in sharp and final. "We're already almost there. We just need to relax for a bit." The car bumped over a pothole, jarring my bones. The knife in my pocket bounced the handle, digging into my ribs. It was a constant reminder, a cold, hard promise waiting to be kept. I looked at Sierra. Her face was illuminated by the dashboard lights, calm and serene. She looked like an angel of death, beautiful and terrible. I wondered if she felt anything. Fear, regret. Or was she empty inside a hollow shell where a soul should be? We reached the turnoff for the old logging road. It was a dead end, a place where teenagers went to drink and hook up, a place where secrets were traded in the dark. Sierra navigated the ruts and roots with ease, the car rocking violently. Finally, we reached the clearing. It wasn't much of a clearing, just a slightly wider patch of dirt surrounded by towering oaks and pines. The darkness here was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered everything. Sierra put the car in park but left the headlights on. Two beams of light cut through the gloom, illuminating a patch of weeds and a fallen log. "We're here," Sierra announced. "Spooky," Kylie joked, peering out the window. It looks like the set of a horror movie. You have no idea, I thought. Let's go, Sierra said, unbuckling her seatbelt. I need to stretch my legs. We all got out. The heat was oppressive, wrapping around us like a wet wool blanket. The crickets were deafening, a cacophony of screeching that filled the silence. I stepped onto the dirt, my knees shaking so bad I thought I might collapse. Wait, Sierra said, walking around to the back of the car. I think I have some blankets in the trunk. The ground is probably gross. Kylie followed her. I hung back, standing in the glare of the red tail lights. I watched as Sierra popped the trunk. The lid swung up with a hiss. Inside, nestled between a spare tire and a pile of old textbooks, was a shovel. It was a spade, the metal blade rusted and caked with old dirt, the wooden handle smooth from use. Next to it was a plastic bag, the kind you get from the grocery store, tied tight. Through the translucent white plastic, I could see the distinct fabric of a clean t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. Kylie stared at the items. For a second, the world stopped spinning. The crickets seemed to hold their breath. The logic of the scene didn't add up. Why would you bring a shovel to a smoke session? Why would you bring a change of clothes? Kylie looked up at Sierra, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Sierra, why is there a shovel in your trunk? My heart stopped. This was it. She knew. She had to know. The survival instinct, that primal alarm bell that rings in the brains of prey animals, should be deafening right now. Run, Kylie. Run! But Sierra didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She laughed, a casual, easy sound that echoed off the trees. Oh, that my mom made me clean out the garden yesterday. I forgot to take it out, and the bag is just gym clothes I forgot to wash. I'm a mess, you know that. It was a lie. A blatant, terrible lie. Who forgets a shovel? Who brings gym clothes to the woods? But Kylie wanted to believe. She needed to believe. To doubt Sierra would be to doubt the foundation of her entire world. To doubt Sierra would mean accepting that her best friends were monsters. And Kylie wasn't ready to see the monsters yet. Her face relaxed. The suspicion drained away, replaced by that familiar, trusting smile. You're such a slob, she teased, reaching into the trunk and grabbing a blanket. Remind me to never let you borrow my clothes. Deal, Sierra said, slamming the trunk shut. The sound was final. The shovel was hidden again, but its presence lingered in the air, a phantom limb of violence. Let's go sit over there. Sierra pointed to the fallen log illuminated by the headlights. It looks dry. We walked into the light. My shadow stretched out in front of me, long and distorted, a grotesque caricature of a girl. I felt like I was watching myself from above, a puppet being jerked along by invisible strings. Turn back, my mind screamed. Tell her now. Get in the car and drive away. Save her, save yourself. But my feet kept moving. 1 step, 2 steps. The dirt crunched under my sneakers. The knife in my pocket felt heavier with every yard, pulling me down, anchoring me to this path. We reached the log. Kylie sat in the middle. Sierra sat on her left. I sat on her right. We were a perfect little row, just like in the movies. The 3 Musketeers. So, Kylie said, pulling the pack of cigarettes from her pocket and fumbling with the cellophane wrapper. What have you guys been up to? I feel like I've missed everything. Sierra leaned back, her hands resting on her knees. She looked comfortable. She looked like she was sitting on her front porch, not in the middle of a murder scene. Not much, she said. Just planning. Planning what? Kylie asked, finally getting a cigarette out. She put it between her lips, the white paper stark against her pink gloss. Summer trip, beach week. I stared at the ground. There was a beetle crawling over a dead leaf, oblivious to the giants above it. I wished I was that beetle. I wished I was anything but me. Sierra turned to look at me. Her face was in shadow, backlit by the car headlights, but I could feel her eyes burning into the side of my head. It was time. The script had been written, rehearsals were over. It was opening night. Hey, Riley, Sierra said, her voice casual, conversational, the kind of tone you use to ask for a piece of gum. I looked up. My throat was dry as sandpaper. I couldn't breathe. Yeah, I croaked. Sierra looked past Kylie, locking eyes with me. A small, chilling smile played on her lips. "Do you have a lighter?" she asked. "The code, the signal, on 3. Kylie patted her pockets, frowning. "Shoot, I forgot mine." "Riley, you got one." She turned to me, her face open, expectant. She was waiting for a flame. She had no idea that the only thing I had for her was darkness. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed past the imaginary lighter and wrapped around the cold, taped handle of the knife. My grip tightened until my knuckles turned white. The texture of the handle was rough against my sweating palm. "Riley?" Kylie asked, tilting her head. "You okay?" I looked at her one last time. I memorized the way her nose crinkled when she was confused. I memorized the scatter of freckles across her cheeks. I memorized the life in her eyes because I knew I was about to extinguish it. "I have it," I whispered. I drew in a breath that tasted of ozone and impending death. The woods seemed to go silent, the crickets pausing their song to witness the betrayal. 1. I pulled the knife from my pocket. 2. Sierra moved her hand, diving into her own waistband. 3. "I'm sorry," I thought, but the words never made it to my lips. Instead, I lunged. The world tilted on its axis and gravity ceased to exist. There was only the motion, the blade, and the girl who loved us too much. The first strike didn't feel like violence. It felt like punching a pillow. The knife sank into the meat of her shoulder, meeting resistance that shocked me. Skin is tougher than you think. It doesn't tear like paper. It resists. Kylie gasped. It wasn't a scream, not yet. It was a sharp intake of air, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. She looked down at her shoulder at the handle of the knife protruding from her hoodie and then up at me. Her eyes were wide, 2 full moons reflecting the horror of the universe. "Riley," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" Then Sierra struck from the other side, and the screaming started. It was a sound that tore through the canopy of the trees, a sound that would echo in my nightmares for the rest of eternity. It was the sound of a heart breaking. At the same exact moment it stopped beating. We had crossed the line. There was no going back to math class. There was no going back to slushies and sleepovers. We were no longer girls. We were something else entirely. We were the monsters in the woods, and we had just begun to feed. The scream that tore out of Kylie's throat wasn't human. It was the sound of a wounded animal, a raw, jagged noise that ripped through the heavy summer air and shattered the stillness of the Blackwood forest. It was the sound of a reality snapping in half. One moment we were 3 teenagers sitting on a log, smoking stolen cigarettes and talking about boys. The next we were characters in a tragedy written in red ink. My hand was still vibrating from the impact. The knife had hit bone or collarbone maybe, or a rib, and the shock wave traveled up my arm, settling in my teeth. I pulled the blade back. It made a wet, sucking sound like boots pulling out of deep mud. Blood didn't spray like it does in the movies. It welled up dark and thick in the moonlight, soaking into the gray fabric of her hoodie instantly. "Riley!" Kylie shrieked again, scrambling backward off the log. She fell into the dirt, kicking her legs out, trying to crab walk away from me. Her eyes were wide, white rims surrounding irises that were dilated with pure, unadulterated terror. "Riley, stop! What are you doing? It's me, it's Kylie!" She thought it was a prank. For a split second, her brain was trying to rationalize the pain, trying to force this nightmare into a box labeled bad joke. She reached out a hand toward me, palm up, fingers trembling. It was a gesture of supplication of trust. She was asking me to help her up. She was asking me to tell her that the knife was rubber, that the blood was corn syrup. Then Sierra moved. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. Sierra launched herself off the log with the grace of a jungle cat tackling Kylie into the weeds. They hit the ground with a heavy thud, a tangle of limbs and blonde hair. Sierra raised her arm high, the blade in her hand, catching the beam of the car headlights for a brief, terrible second. Then she brought it down. Thud. "Just die!" Sierra grunted, the effort straining her voice. "Why won't you just die?" Thud. Kylie's screams changed pitch. They went from confused terror to agony. She was fighting back now, her survival instinct overriding the shock. She kicked at Sierra, her sneakers scraping against Sierra's shins. She clawed at Sierra's face, leaving thin red lines across her cheek. But Sierra was on top of her, pinning her down with a weight that seemed impossible for a girl her size. Sierra was anchored by hatred. Kylie was floating on fear. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, the knife in my hand feeling like a lead weight. I was watching a murder. I was watching my best friend murder my other best friend. The dissociation hit me like a wave of cold water. I felt like I was floating 10 feet above the clearing, looking down at this gruesome tableau. That's not me, I thought. That girl in the gray hoodie isn't me. I'm at home. I'm sleeping. This is a dream. "Riley!" Sierra screamed at me, not looking up from her work. Her voice was guttural, unrecognizable. "Get her, help me, she's fighting." The command snapped me back into my body. The string that connected me to Sierra, the invisible leash she had held for years, yanked tight. I couldn't disobey. Disobedience was a sin in the religion of Sierra. I stepped forward. Kylie looked up at me. Her face was already a mask of blood smeared from where she had wiped her nose. Tears were cutting tracks through the red grime. Her eyes locked onto mine. "Riley, please," she whimpered, the air bubbling in her chest. "Help me. We're friends. We're best friends. We're best friends." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. They were true. We were. We had painted each other's nails. We had held each other's hair back while vomiting cheap vodka. We had planned our weddings in the back of math class. "Do it," Sierra roared, stabbing down again into Kylie's leg. I dropped to my knees in the dirt. The smell of the earth was overpowered by the metallic tang of blood. It smelled like a butcher shop. It smelled like pennies and vomit. I raised my knife. I didn't look at her face. I couldn't. I looked at her stomach, at the pink fabric of her shirt that was now stained black. I thrust the knife forward. This time I felt it tear. I felt the resistance of muscle, the pop of skin. It was sickeningly intimate. Killing someone isn't like shooting a gun. There is no distance. You feel every layer of life you are severing. You are connected to them by the blade. Kylie let out a sound that I will hear until the day I die. It wasn't a scream. It was a gurgle, a wet, rattling gasp as her lungs filled with fluid. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingernails digging into my skin, breaking the surface. She was holding on to me like an anchor, trying to keep herself tethered to the world of the living. "Why?" she wheezed. Blood flecked her lips. "Why?" She didn't ask how. She didn't ask who. She asked why. Because the physical pain was secondary to the emotional amputation. We weren't just killing her body, we were dismantling her soul, proving that every moment of love she had ever felt from us was a lie. "Shut up," Sierra hissed. She was frantic now, stabbing wildly. The elegance was gone. It was just a butchery. "Shut up, shut up, shut up." Kylie's grip on my wrist slackened. Her hand slid down my arm, leaving a long smear of red, a mark of Cain that I knew no amount of soap would ever wash away. Her legs stopped kicking. Her body went into a series of violent spasms, jerking against the dirt like a fish thrown onto a bank. Then she stopped moving. The sudden stillness was louder than the screaming. The crickets, which had fallen silent during the struggle, were still holding their breath. The only sound in the clearing was the heavy, ragged breathing of 3 girls. 2 living, 1 dying. Sierra rolled off of her, collapsing into the dirt. She was panting, her chest heaving. Her face was splattered with blood, tiny speckles across her forehead and nose like horrific freckles. She pushed her hair out of her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing more red across her temple. I sat back on my heels, dropping the knife. It clattered against a rock, the sound sharp and final. My hands were shaking so hard they were vibrating. I looked at them. They were coated in red gloves. I couldn't see my skin. "Is she—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The word dead felt too big, too final to fit in my mouth. Sierra crawled over to Kylie's head. She leaned down, putting her ear close to Kylie's mouth. "No," Sierra whispered, disgust lacing her tone. She's still breathing. I leaned forward, and then I heard it. Gurgle. Shh. Gurgle. It was a wet, sucking sound. The sound of a drain unclogging. It was the sound of her body fighting a losing war. Her windpipe had been cut, or maybe her lungs were punctured. Every breath was a struggle, pulling air through a slurry of blood. Kylie's eyes were open. They were fixed on the canopy of trees above us, staring at the black leaves and the sliver of moon. She wasn't seeing them, though. Her pupils were blown wide, fixed on something beyond this world. But she was still there. I could feel it. She was trapped in her own failing body, unable to move, unable to speak, forced to listen to the sound of her own death, while her murderers sat 2 feet away. "She won't die," Sierra said, her voice rising in panic. "Why won't she die? We stabbed her like 50 times. Maybe we hit an artery," I offered weakly, my voice trembling. "Maybe she's bleeding out." "It's taken too long," Sierra snapped. She looked around the clearing, her eyes wild. "We need to finish it. We can't leave her like this. She might crawl to the road." "She can't move, Sierra," I said, looking at Kylie's mangled legs. "Look at her." "You don't know that," Sierra hissed. "Adrenaline is crazy. People do crazy things." She picked up her knife again. She straddled Kylie's chest, her knees pinning down the girl's arms. Kylie didn't react. She just kept staring at the sky. Gurgle. "I'm sorry, Kai," Sierra whispered. But it wasn't an apology, it was a dismissal. It was the way you say sorry to a dog before you put it down. Sierra placed the tip of the knife against the hollow of Kylie's throat. I looked away. I couldn't watch this part. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears to block out the sound. But you can't block out sound when you're the one making the silence. I heard the wet tear. I heard a sudden violent release of air, and then the gurgling stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, pressing down on my eardrums. It felt like the woods themselves had died along with her. I opened my eyes. Sierra was climbing off the body. She looked exhausted, like she had just run a marathon. She wiped her knife on Kylie's jeans, a casual gesture that made bile rise in my throat. "It's done," Sierra said flatly. I looked at Kylie. Her head was tilted to the side now, at an unnatural angle. Her mouth was slightly open, her lips stained red. Her eyes were still staring at the sky, but the light behind them was gone. It's true what they say. You know death when you see it. The person vacates the premises. What was left in the dirt wasn't Kylie. It was just an object. A broken doll. Meat. "We have to bury her," Sierra said, standing up and brushing the dirt off her knees. She walked back to the car, her movements stiff. She popped the trunk again and grabbed the shovel. She tossed it to me. I fumbled, catching it by the handle. The wood felt rough against my sticky palms. "You dig," Sierra commanded. "My arms are tired." I didn't argue. I walked over to a spot near the tree line, away from the body. I jammed the blade of the shovel into the ground. Clang! The metal hit rock. I moved a few inches and tried again. Clang! The ground in Blackwood wasn't soft loam. It was hard-packed clay interwoven with a dense network of ancient roots and rocks. I jumped on the shovel, putting my full weight on it. The blade sank in maybe an inch before hitting a root as thick as my wrist. "It's not working," I said, panic rising in my chest. "The ground is too hard." "Try harder," Sierra snapped. She was pacing back and forth, checking her phone. "It's 12:45. We need to be home by 2:00. I tried. I really did. I hacked at the ground like a madwoman, sweat pouring down my face, mixing with the blood spatters. I dug until my blisters popped and bled, but after 10 minutes all I had managed to create was a shallow depression barely deep enough to bury a cat, let alone a teenage girl. I threw the shovel down. "I can't. It's impossible. We need a pickaxe or something. We can't dig a grave here." Sierra stared at the shallow hole, her face twisting in rage. She kicked the dirt, sending a spray of dust over my shoes. "Useless," she muttered. "Everything is so difficult." She walked back to the body. She stood over Kylie, hands on her hips, looking down with an expression of annoyance rather than remorse. It was as if Kylie had inconvenienced her by being difficult to dispose of. "Fine," Sierra said. "We can't bury her. We'll have to cover her." "Cover her?" I asked, my voice high and shrill. "With what?" "Leaves, branches, whatever." Sierra gestured to the forest floor. "Just hide her, so nobody sees her from the road." It felt wrong. It felt like a desecration. To leave her here on top of the cold ground, exposed to the elements, to the animals. "We can't just leave her," I whispered. "Do you want to carry her to the car?" Sierra challenged, her eyes flashing dangerous. "Do you want to drive around with a dead body in the trunk until we find soft dirt? Because I don't." I looked at Kylie. She looked so lonely. "Start gathering branches," Sierra ordered. We spent the next 20 minutes scavenging the forest floor. We dragged fallen limbs, rotting logs, and armfuls of dead leaves. We piled them on top of her. We covered her pink sneakers. We covered her blood-soaked jeans. We covered her hoodie. Finally, I picked up a large piece of bark to place over her face. I paused, looking at her one last time. Her eyes were still open. I felt a sudden irrational urge to close them. I reached out a trembling hand. My fingers brushed her eyelid. It was still warm. The warmth shocked me. It was the last fading ember of the girl I had known since kindergarten. I pushed her eyelids down. They stayed shut. She looked peaceful now, or as peaceful as a murder victim can look. "Hurry up, Riley," Sierra called from the car. I dropped the bark over her face. We piled more leaves on top until the shape of a human body was obscured, replaced by a mound of forest debris. It looked like a natural feature of the landscape if you didn't look too closely. But if you knew, you could see the outline. And then I saw it. Just as I turned to leave, a gust of wind shifted the leaves near the bottom of the pile. Her right hand was sticking out from the debris. Her fingers were curled slightly, palm up, reaching out into the empty air. The moonlight caught the silver ring on her index finger, a ring I had bought her for her 15th birthday. I froze. I should cover it. I should go back and kick more leaves over it. "Riley!" Sierra screamed. The car engine roared to life. The headlights cut through the darkness, blinding me. I turned and ran. I left her hand exposed. I left her reaching for a god that hadn't saved her. I scrambled into the passenger seat of the sedan. The interior light was on, and for the first time we saw the true extent of the carnage. The car was a slaughterhouse. My hands were red. My arms were red up to the elbows. There was blood on my face and my hair. My hoodie was stiff with it. Sierra was the same. Her shirt, which had been white, was now a tie-dye of crimson. But the worst part was the smell. In the open air of the forest, the smell had room to dissipate. Inside the confined space of the car, it was concentrated. It was thick, metallic, and primal. It smelled like the inside of a body. Sierra slammed the car into reverse, the tires spinning in the dirt. We fishtailed backward, nearly hitting a tree. She threw it into drive and floored it. We tore out of the clearing, leaving Kylie behind in the dark. We drove in silence for the first few miles. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, creeping horror. My brain was trying to process what my hands had done, and it was failing. I kept looking at my palms, waiting for them to transform into monster claws, but they were just my hands, just Riley's hands. "There's blood on the steering wheel," Sierra said, her voice detached. She pulled a pack of wet wipes from the center console. "Here. Wipe everything you touched." She tossed the pack to me. I pulled out a wipe. It smelled of lemon and blood. A new scent memory unlocked, one that would make me gag every time I walked down the cleaning aisle at the grocery store for years to come. I wiped the door handle. I wiped the dashboard where I had braced myself. I wiped the seatbelt buckle. The white wipes turned pink, then red, then brown. "We need to go to the creek," Sierra said. "We can't go home like this." We drove to a small pull-off near the river, a spot usually reserved for fishermen. It was deserted. We grabbed the plastic bag from the trunk, the one with the clean clothes Sierra had forgotten. We stripped in the darkness. I peeled off my bloody hoodie, the fabric making a wet peeling sound as it separated from my skin. My shirt underneath was soaked through. I took off my jeans, my underwear. I stood naked in the moonlight, shivering violently, covered in the blood of my best friend. We waded into the creek. The water was freezing straight from the mountain runoff. It shocked my system, making me gasp. I scrubbed at my skin. I scrubbed until it was raw and red. I watched the blood swirl away in the water, dark ribbons dissolving into the current flowing downstream toward the town, carrying our secret with it. "Did you get it all?" Sierra asked, inspecting her arms. "I think so," I chattered, my teeth clicking together. We dressed in the clean clothes. They were too big for me, Sierra's sweatpants pooling around my ankles. We put our bloody clothes into the plastic bag along with the wet wipes and the shoes. "We burned the bag," Sierra said. "Not here. Too risky. We'll do it at my house. My parents are asleep." We got back in the car. The smell was still there, faint but undeniable. "We need to agree on the story," Sierra said, her eyes fixed on the road. Her voice was steady now, the master strategist taking over. The killer was gone. The liar had taken her place. "The story?" I asked dumbly. "Kylie asked us to drop her off," Sierra recited. "She wanted to be dropped off at the end of the road near the highway. She said she was meeting a guy, someone from out of town. We don't know who. We told her it was dangerous, but she insisted. So we dropped her off around midnight. That's the last time we saw her." I nodded, repeating the words in my head. Dropped her off. Meeting a guy. Last time we saw her. It sounded plausible. Kylie was impulsive. She talked to guys online. People would believe it because it was easier than believing her best friends butchered her in the woods. "Promise me, Riley," Sierra said, glancing over at me. Her eyes were hard, two pieces of flint. "Promise me you won't crack. We are in this together now. It's us against the world, just like we always wanted." "I promise," I whispered. "Swear it," she demanded. "Swear it on your life." "I swear." And then when we drove back into town, the houses were still dark. The world hadn't changed while we were gone. The street lights still hummed. The stop signs were still red, but everything felt different. The colors were too sharp. The shadows were too deep. I looked out the window at the passing trees, and for a second I swore I saw a figure standing in the tree line, a girl in a gray hoodie waving at me with a bloody hand. We reached Sierra's house. We crept into the backyard to the fire pit. We doused a bag of clothes in lighter fluid. Sierra struck a match. The flame flared up, illuminating her face. She looked demonic in the flickering light, her shadows dancing across the lawn. She dropped the match. The bag ignited with a whoosh. The smell of burning polyester and melting rubber filled the air. We watched the flames consume the evidence. I watched my favorite hoodie turn to ash. I watched Kylie's blood boil and evaporate. "It's over," Sierra whispered, watching the fire die down. But she was wrong. It wasn't over. The fire didn't cleanse us. It just branded us. As I watched the last embers fade, I realized that the silence of the woods hadn't followed us home. The sound was still there, playing on a loop in the back of my mind, louder than the crackling fire, louder than my own heartbeat. Gurgle. Gurgle, the sound of the grave, the sound of a secret that refused to die. We went inside Sierra's house. We climbed into her bed just like we had 1,000 times before. We lay there in the dark side by side, the murderers. Sierra fell asleep almost instantly, her breathing deep and even. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I traced the cracks in the plaster with my eyes. And then, just as sleep began to pull at the edges of my consciousness, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I froze. Who would be texting me at 3:00 a.m.? I reached out a trembling hand and grabbed it. I unlocked the screen. The brightness blinded me for a second. When my eyes adjusted, my heart stopped beating. The text was from Kylie. "Where are you guys? I'm cold." I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a thud. I sat up, pulling the blankets up to my chin, staring at the device like it was a bomb. It buzzed again. "Why did you leave me?" I looked at Sierra sleeping peacefully beside me. I looked at the dark window. I realized then that the woods were vast and deep and full of things we didn't understand. We had buried a body, but we hadn't buried the girl. Kylie was gone, but she wasn't absent, and she was cold. I pulled the covers over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, praying for the sun to rise. But in the darkness under the duvet, the smell of vanilla and iron was suffocating, and right by my ear, distinct and wet, I heard it again. Gurgle. The nightmare had just begun. The phone on the floor went dark, the buzzing stopped. But the silence that followed was heavier than the noise, a physical weight pressing down on my chest, pinning me to the mattress in Sierra's guest room. "Riley," Sierra mumbled, shifting in her sleep. She sounded annoyed, not afraid. "Turn that off. You're being loud." I stared at her back. How could she sleep? We had just washed the blood of our best friend off our bodies in a freezing creek less than 3 hours ago. We had watched fire consume the evidence, and yet Sierra's breathing was rhythmic, deep, the sleep of the innocent, or the sleep of the soulless. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers, expecting to see the text again. "Where are you guys? I'm cold." I unlocked the screen. Nothing. No new messages. The last text thread was from my mom asking if I was staying over at Sierra's. There was no text from Kylie. Her name wasn't at the top of my inbox. I scrolled down. Her last message to me was from 2 days ago. "Can we talk? I miss you." It was a hallucination. My brain, frantic and broken, was projecting its guilt onto the LCD screen. I squeezed the phone tight enough to crack the plastic case. "I'm losing it," I thought. "It's been 3 hours and I'm already losing my mind." But then I smelled it again. A waft of air conditioning kicked on from the vent above the bed, and it didn't smell like Sierra's house, which usually smelled of expensive detergent and stale cigarette smoke. It smelled of damp earth. It smelled of the copper penny tang of open veins. I pulled the duvet over my head, curling into a fetal ball. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the darkness behind my eyelids wasn't empty. It was a movie screen playing a loop of the last hour. The knife entering pink fabric. The look of confusion on Kylie's face. The way her hand twitched in the leaves. Gurgle. I clapped my hands over my ears. "Stop," I whispered into the pillow. "Stop it. She's gone. She's gone." But the woods don't let go of what you give them. The next morning was a master class in dissociation. The sun came up bright and offensive, shining through the blinds as if the world hadn't fundamentally changed. Sierra was up first. I heard her in the kitchen humming. I walked out feeling like a ghost haunting my own body. Sierra was eating a bowl of cereal, scrolling through Twitter. She looked fresh. She had showered again, her hair wet and slicked back. She wore a bright yellow t-shirt that said, "Good vibes only." The irony made bile rise in my throat. "Morning sunshine," she said, not looking up from her phone. "My mom made pancakes if you want some." I stared at her. "How can you eat?" Sierra put her spoon down. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the cold, calculating machinery underneath. "Because I'm hungry, Riley. And you need to eat, too. If you look like a zombie, people will ask questions. Normal people eat breakfast. Be normal. Be normal." That was the new commandment. We went to Kylie's house later that afternoon. It was Sierra's idea. "We have to go," she insisted. "If we don't, it looks suspicious. Best friends would be worried. Best friends would be knocking on her door." Walking up the concrete steps to Kylie's apartment building felt like walking to the gallows. I knew these steps. I knew the crack on the third step where Kylie had tripped last winter. I knew the smell of the hallway, old carpet, and cooking onions. Mr. and Mrs. Miller opened the door. They looked tired, worried, but not frantic. Not yet. To them, Kylie was just a teenager who had snuck out and was late coming home. They didn't know they were parents of a corpse. "Girls," Mrs. Miller said, a look of relief washing over her face. "Thank God. Is Kylie with you?" Sierra stepped forward, her face crumpling into a mask of perfect, rehearsed concern. "No, Mrs. Miller, that's why we're here. We haven't heard from her all day. She's not answering our texts." "Mrs. Miller's face fell. She's not with you, but she snuck out last night. I checked her room this morning. The window was open. I assumed she was with you two. She was... Sierra lied, the words flowing like poisoned honey. We picked her up around 11. We just drove around for a bit, listened to music. But then she asked us to drop her off. Drop her off? Mr. Miller stepped into the hallway, his brow furrowed. Drop her off where? At the end of the road, Sierra said, pointing vaguely toward the edge of town. Near the highway. She said she was meeting someone, a guy. What guy? Mr. Miller's voice rose. We don't know, I spoke up, my voice shaking. Sierra shot me a warning glance, but Mrs. Miller interpreted my shaking as fear for her daughter. She wouldn't tell us his name. She just said he was from out of town. We told her it was a bad idea. We told her not to go, but she insisted. She got out of the car and that was it. Mrs. Miller put a hand to her mouth. Oh my God! We thought she'd be back by now, Sierra said, reaching out to touch Mrs. Miller's arm. We're really scared, Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller pulled Sierra into a hug. I watched horrified as the mother of the girl we murdered embraced the murderer. It's not your fault, honey. Mrs. Miller sobbed into Sierra's shoulder. You tried to stop her. You're good friends. I felt the room spin. The walls of the hallway seemed to pulse. I looked past them into the living room toward the door of Kylie's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and for a second I saw her, standing in the doorway of her room. Not the clean, happy Kylie, the Kylie from the woods. Her skin was gray, her hoodie soaked in black blood. Her head was tilted at that unnatural broken angle. She was staring right at me, her eyes milky and dead. She raised a finger to her lips. Shh! I blinked and she was gone, just an empty doorframe. Riley, Mr. Miller asked, are you okay? You look pale. I need to sit down, I gasped. Come in, Mrs. Miller ushered us inside. I'm calling the police. The police arrived within the hour. Officer Hunsaker, a man we had known our whole lives, a man who coached the junior league softball team. He sat on the couch, notebook in hand, looking grave. We told the story again. The drop-off, the mystery guy, the plea to stay. We built a narrative fortress brick by brick. Sierra was the architect. I was the laborer. I followed her lead, echoing her details, nodding when she nodded, crying when she cried. And you didn't see the car? Hunsaker asked. The guy she was meeting? No, Sierra said. She told us to drop her off at the corner. She walked the rest of the way. She didn't want us to see him. It was a brilliant lie because it played into every parent's fear and every cop's prejudice about teenage girls. Rebellious, secretive, meeting boys on the internet, it shifted the blame from us to Kylie. She was the one who made the bad choice. We were just the innocent bystanders. But as Hunsaker wrote in his notebook, the scratching of his pen sounded like the noise of the shovel hitting the hard dirt. Scritch, scratch, clang. I looked down at the carpet. It was beige, but in my peripheral vision I could see stains spreading outward from my feet. Red, blooming pools of blood soaking into the Miller's living room rug. I shifted my feet, but the stains followed me. It's not real, I chanted internally. It's stress, it's trauma, it's not real, but the smell was real. The air in the house was thick with vanilla Kylie's perfume. It was everywhere. It was in the throw pillows, in the curtains, and underneath it, that sharp, metallic tang. We left the house an hour later. As we walked down the front steps, I heard a sound from the window above. A tapping, tap, tap, tap. I looked up. Kylie's bedroom window was closed. The blinds were drawn. But the silhouette of a hand was pressed against the glass, a hand with a silver ring on the index finger. Don't look up, Sierra hissed, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. Just keep walking. Did you see that? I whispered. See what? The window? There's nothing in the window, Riley. Stop it. You're going to blow this. But stop it. She shoved me toward the car. Get a grip. We got away with it. They bought the story. Now we just have to wait. The summer that followed was a slow-motion car crash. Star City transformed. Telephone poles were plastered with flyers missing Kylie Miller, 16 years old, last seen July 6th. Her face was everywhere. That smiling sophomore picture, the one where she wore the blue sweater. Her eyes followed me. In the grocery store, at the gas station, on the bulletin board, at church. Have you seen me? Yes, I wanted to scream. I saw you die. I saw the light go out. Sierra thrived in the chaos. It was sickening to watch. She became the grieving best friend, the tragic heroine of the town's unfolding drama. She tweeted constantly, "Come home safe, Kai. We miss you so much. Sleepovers aren't the same without you. I hate that you're gone. Please, just call us." She posted photos of the three of us on Instagram, photos from the beach trip last year, photos from homecoming. She captioned them with broken heart emojis. The likes poured in. The comments were full of sympathy. "Stay strong, Sierra." "She's lucky to have a friend like you." She was feeding on the attention. It was narcissistic supply of the highest order. She would come over to my house, lying on my bed, reading the comments aloud. "Look at this one," she'd say, crunching on a potato chip. "Cindy from chemistry said she's praying for us." What a fake. She hated Kylie. "Sierra, stop," I'd beg, sitting in the corner, knees pulled to my chest. "Don't talk about her like that." "Like what? She's famous now, Riley. She always wanted to be popular. Now she is." I was rotting. That's the only way to describe it. While Sierra polished her performance, I was decaying from the inside out. I stopped eating. Food tasted like ash. Every time I tried to swallow meat, I thought of Kylie's shoulder. I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. My skin turned gray. My hair started falling out in clumps in the shower. My parents were worried. "It's the stress," my mom told the doctor. "She's traumatized by her friend running away." Traumatized, if only they knew. The haunting escalated in August. It wasn't just shadows anymore. It was an invasion of my senses. It started with the water. I couldn't take showers. Every time the water hit the drain, the sound amplified. Gurgle, gurgle. It sounded like her throat. I would stand there naked and shivering, staring at the drain, convinced that blood was going to bubble up instead of water going down. Then came the cold. It was the middle of August in West Virginia, 90 degrees and 90% humidity. But I was freezing. A chill lived in my bones. I wore sweatshirts to bed. I turned the heat on in my car. It didn't help. The cold was coming from inside me or from something attached to me. One night I was driving home from Sierra's. It was late, the roads empty. I was passing the turnoff to the Blackwood forest, the road we had taken that night. I stared straight ahead, refusing to look at the tree line. Suddenly the radio static cut out. My phone was plugged into the aux playing a podcast. The audio stopped. Silence. Then a sound filled the car. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like someone kicking the inside of a trunk. Thump, thump. "Stop!" I screamed, hitting the dashboard. "Stop it!" Then a voice. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from the back seat. "It's dark back here, Riley." I slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt in the middle of the road. I spun around, hard-hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. The back seat was empty, just my gym bag and a pile of old wrappers. I turned back to the front, gasping for air, and there she was, standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights. Kylie, but not the fresh corpse we had left. This was Kylie after a month in the earth. Her skin was sloughing off. Her eyes were gone, eaten by insects, leaving empty black sockets. Her jaw hung loose, unhinged. She was wearing the dirty, bloody hoodie covered in dead leaves and soil. She raised a hand, pointing at me. Her finger was bone white. Screech! My radio blasted back to life at max volume. I screamed, covering my face. When I looked up, the road was empty, just the yellow lines stretching into the dark. I drove the rest of the way home, doing 80, sobbing hysterically. September brought school, and with it a new level of hell. Walking through the hallways was torture. Kylie's locker became a shrine. Students had taped flowers, notes, and pictures to the metal door. Every time I passed it, I felt a physical shove, like cold hands pushing me toward it. "Look at them," Sierra whispered to me one day at lunch, nodding toward a group of girls crying by the shrine. "Hypocrites, they didn't even know her." "We killed her, Sierra," I hissed, my voice cracking. "We killed her!" Sierra slammed her hand onto the cafeteria table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The chatter nearby stopped. Sierra leaned in close, her eyes devoid of anything human. "Shut up!" Her voice was a low growl. "You need to pull yourself together. You are weak, Riley. You've always been weak. That's why you needed me. That's why you needed us. Do not ruin this." "I can't take it anymore," I wept. "I see her. I see her everywhere." "You don't see anything," Sierra said. "It's in your head. You're letting the guilt eat you. Just turn it off. Like a light switch. Click. Done." "I can't turn it off." "Then maybe you should join her," Sierra said. The words hung in the air between us, suspended over our trays of uneaten food. "Maybe you should join her." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. "What did you say?" I whispered. Sierra smiled. It was the same smile she wore when she asked for the lighter. "I said get a grip, or I'll have to clean up another mess." That was the moment the fear of the dead was eclipsed by the fear of the living. I realized then that Sierra hadn't just killed Kylie. She was capable of killing anyone who got in her way, including me, especially me. I was the loose end. I was the liability now. The investigation was tightening its noose. The local police were incompetent, but the FBI had gotten involved. They sensed the cracks in our story. They interviewed us separately. Agent Morgan was a tall woman with eyes that seemed to X-ray my soul. She sat across from me in a small interrogation room at the station. "Riley," she said softly, "your story has some inconsistencies. The timeline doesn't match the cell tower pings. Sierra's phone pinged near Blackwood Forest at midnight. Yours did too." We got lost," I stammered, sweating through my shirt. "We took a wrong turn into a dead-end logging road for 2 hours." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Riley, look at me. You're a good kid. I can see it. You're scared. Who are you scared of?" I looked at the two-way mirror. I knew Sierra wasn't behind it, but I felt her presence. I felt the invisible knife against my ribs. "I'm scared of the guy," I lied. "The guy Kylie met. What if he comes for us?" Morgan sighed. She leaned forward. "There is no guy Riley. We checked Kylie's computer. We checked her phone records. There was no secret boyfriend. No online chats. She was meeting you." "Just you and Sierra." I started to hyperventilate. The walls of the room were closing in. The smell of vanilla filled the small space, choking me. Gurgle. It came from the ventilation duct. Gurgle. Whew. "Do you hear that?" I shrieked, jumping up from my chair. "Hear what, Riley?" "The sound. She's here. She's in the walls." Agent Morgan stood up, alarmed. "Riley, sit down. No one is in the walls." "You don't understand." I clawed at my own neck. "She won't stop. She wants to be found. She's cold. She's so cold." The interrogation ended. They let me go because I was having a medical episode. But I knew they were watching. They were just waiting for me to break. The breaking point came in December. The snow had started to fall, blanketing Star City in white. It should have been peaceful. But to me, the snow looked like a shroud. It was burying the world, just like we buried Kylie. I was in my bedroom. It was midnight, the witching hour. I was sitting on the floor, staring at the corner of the room. For weeks, the shadow in the corner had been growing darker, denser. Tonight it had form. She was there, standing by my closet. The decomposition was gone. She looked like she did that night before the knife, whole, unblemished, wearing her pink hoodie. But she was weeping. Silent tears of blood rolled down her cheeks. She held out her hands. They were cupped as if holding water, but they were holding dirt, black oily earth from the woods. "Riley," her voice whispered. It wasn't in my head this time. It was audible. It vibrated the air molecules in the room. "Why do you hate me? I don't," I sobbed, rocking back and forth. "I loved you. You were my sister." "Sisters don't count to 3, the ghost said. She stepped forward. The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath misted in the air. Frost began to form on the inside of my window pane. "She's going to kill you too," Kylie whispered. "Sierra. She's sharpening the knife. I can hear her thoughts. She's coming for you." "No?" "Yes. You are the only witness. You are the only threat. She will bury you next to me, and then we will be together in the dark forever. Is that what you want, to rot with me?" "No, I want to go home. I want to be clean." "You can never be clean," the spirit said, her face suddenly twisting, her jaw dropping open to reveal a mouthful of maggots. "But you can be free. Tell them where I am. I'm cold, Riley. The foxes are biting me. The worms are inside me. Take me home." The scream that left my body shattered the last remnant of my sanity. I screamed until my throat bled. I threw a lamp at the apparition. It passed through her and shattered against the wall. My parents burst into the room. They found me curled on the floor, clawing at the carpet, babbling about blood and foxes and knives. "She's here! Get her out! She's bleeding on the rug!" I shrieked. "Riley, there's no one here!" my dad yelled, grabbing my shoulders. "Check the trunk!" I screamed. "Check the shovel! Check the woods!" We counted to 3. 1, 2, 3, die, die, die. That night they took me to the hospital, the psychiatric ward, white walls, no sharp objects, no shoelaces. It was the first time in 6 months I was physically separated from Sierra. Her gravity couldn't reach me here. Her threats couldn't penetrate the locked doors. For 3 days I sat in a chair staring at the wall. The doctors gave me pills. They made the world fuzzy, but they didn't stop the smell. The smell of vanilla and rot was seared into my olfactory nerves. On the 4th day, Agent Morgan came to visit. She didn't bring a notebook. She just brought a cup of coffee. "Riley," she said gently, "I can't help you if you don't let me. I know you didn't do this alone. I know you're scared of her." I looked at Morgan. Then I looked at the corner of the hospital room. Kylie was there, sitting in the visitor's chair. She looked peaceful. She wasn't bleeding. She wasn't rotting. She was just waiting. She nodded at me. A slow, sad nod. "Tell her," Kylie mouthed. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath of air I'd taken in 6 months that didn't taste like iron. "I need a lawyer," I whispered, "and I need you to promise me something." "What?" Morgan asked. "Promise me you'll keep Sierra away from me, because if she sees me, she'll finish counting." Morgan nodded. "I promise." "Okay," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I can't show you on a map. The woods, they all look the same, but I can take you there. I can take you to her." I looked at the ghost in the chair. "I'm taking you home, Kylie," I whispered. And for the first time since July 6th, the gurgling sound stopped. The silence in my head was beautiful. The drive to the woods in the police cruiser was surreal. I was in the back, handcuffed, wearing a hospital gown and a heavy winter coat they had draped over me. It was January now. The trees were bare skeletons against a gray sky. Snow covered everything. "Turn left here," I instructed the deputy driving. My memory was sharper than any map. I remembered every bump, every turn. The trauma had etched the route into my hippocampus like a circuit board. We reached the dead end. The clearing was buried under a foot of snow. It looked innocent. It looked pure. It was hard to believe that beneath that pristine white blanket lay the darkest secret of my life. I stepped out of the car. The cold air bit my face. My boots crunched on the snow, a sound too similar to the crunch of dry leaves. "Where is she, Riley?" Agent Morgan asked, standing beside me. I walked toward the tree line. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through water. I scanned the ground. The snow leveled everything out, hiding the contours of the forest floor. But then I saw it, a depression in the snow, a subtle sinking where the pile of branches had settled over time, and a flash of color, a tiny speck of pink synthetic fabric that the wind had exposed. I pointed a shaking, cuffed hand. "There!" I choked out. "She's there!" The forensics team moved in. They brushed away the snow. They lifted the branches. And there she was, or what was left of her. The animals had been at her. Nature had done its work. She wasn't the girl I knew anymore. She was bones and scraps of clothing. But I saw the ring, the silver ring on the finger bone. I fell to my knees in the snow. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I just vomited. I retched until my stomach was empty, expelling the last of the poison, the last of the lie. "We got her," a deputy shouted. "Call it in." I looked back at the police car, and there, standing by the trunk, was Sierra. Not the real Sierra. She was at home, probably tweeting about missing her best friend. This was the Sierra in my mind. The monster. She was glaring at me, her eyes burning with hatred. She mouthed the words, "You promised." I looked away from her. I looked at the sky. "I broke my promise to you," I whispered to the wind, "so I could keep my promise to her." The wind howled through the Blackwood trees, sounding like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. The sound of judgment, the sound of the end. But at least the gurgling was gone. The woods had given her back. Now they were coming for me. The discovery of the body didn't bring the peace I expected. There was no cinematic moment where the clouds parted, and a beam of sunlight illuminated the forest floor. There was only the clinical efficiency of the crime scene unit, the flashing of cameras that looked like lightning in the snowy gloom, and the zip of the black body bag, a sound that was horribly similar to the sound of a tent opening on a camping trip. That sound, zip, was the period at the end of Kylie's sentence. They put me back in the cruiser. The heater was blasting, but I was shivering so violently my teeth chattered against each other, threatening to crack. I watched through the window as they carried her out. She looked so small in that bag. It was impossible to reconcile the girl who used to dance on my bed singing Taylor Swift into a hairbrush with the bundle of evidence being loaded into a van. Agent Morgan slid into the seat beside me. She didn't look triumphant. She looked tired. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and revulsion that I knew I would see on everyone's face for the rest of my life. "We picked up Sierra," she said quietly. "We found her at a Cracker Barrel with her mom. She was eating pancakes." I laughed. It was a dry, broken sound that hurt my throat. Pancakes, of course. She asked if she could finish her meal before we cuffed her. Morgan continued shaking her head in disbelief. "She didn't ask why. She didn't ask about you. She just asked if she could finish her pancakes." That was Sierra. To the very end, she was the main character of a movie only she was watching. The rest of us, me, Kylie, her parents, the police, we were just props. Obstacles to be managed or removed. The interrogation room was different this time. It wasn't about catching me anymore. It was about understanding the anatomy of the monster. They wanted the why. Humans are wired to seek cause and effect. We need reasons. Wars are fought for land, for religion, for resources. Crimes of passion are fought for love or jealousy. Robberies are committed for money. But we had none of that. The prosecutor, a man with gray hair and a face etched with the horrors of his job, sat across from me. He had photos spread out on the table. Photos of the three of us from freshman year. Photos of the knife. Photos of the hole in the woods. "Riley," he said, leaning forward, his voice heavy with the weight of the question he was about to ask. "We have the body, we have the weapon, we have your confession. But there is one thing that doesn't make sense. One thing the jury is going to need to understand." I stared at the metal table, tracing my reflection in the brushed steel. I looked like a ghost. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you do it? Was it a boy? Did she steal money from you? Did she threaten to expose a secret? Was it drugs?" I closed my eyes. I thought back to that day in math class. I thought back to the text messages. I thought back to the feeling of driving around Star City, bored out of our minds, feeling like the world was a cage and we were the tigers pacing inside. "No," I whispered. "Then what?" the prosecutor pressed. "Give me something, Riley. Help me understand how two 16-year-old girls can butcher their best friend." I looked up. I met his eyes, and I delivered the truth that would haunt the headlines for years. The truth that was more terrifying than any demon, any ghost, any masked slasher. We just didn't like her anymore. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. The prosecutor blinked once, twice. He sat back in his chair looking as if I had just slapped him. "That's it," he breathed. "We just didn't like her." I repeated the words, tasting like ash. She was annoying. We didn't want to be friends with her, but we didn't know how to stop being friends, so we decided to stop her. It was the banality of evil in its purest form. We didn't kill her for a crown. We killed her because she was an inconvenience. We killed her because we were bored and cruel and empty. We treated a human life like a disposable vape used up flavorless and tossed into the weeds without a second thought. The trial was a blur of flashbulbs and angry shouts. They called us the teen killers. They called us monsters. People I had known my whole life stood outside the courthouse with signs that said, "A rot in hell." I pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. My cooperation bought me a plea deal, 30 years. I would be 46 when I saw the outside world again. Sierra didn't plea. She went to trial. She sat in the courtroom wearing a crisp blouse, her hair perfectly straight, listening to the details of how she stabbed Kylie 50 times. She didn't cry. She didn't look away from the autopsy photos. Occasionally she would lean over to her lawyer and whisper something, smiling slightly. When the verdict was read, guilty of first-degree murder, life in prison with mercy, she didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She just nodded as if the waiter had confirmed her order. The only time I saw emotion from her was when they let her out. She walked past the defense table, past the weeping Miller family, and she looked directly at me in the witness box. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked disappointed, like I was a toy that had broken too easily. She mouthed one word to me, "Snitch." Then she was gone, swallowed by the system. Prison is loud. That's the first thing you learn. It's never quiet. There is always shouting, slamming doors, the buzz of electric locks. But at night, when the lights dim to a low, sickly orange, the noise fades just enough for the memories to creep back in. I have a cellmate named Tasha. She killed her abusive husband with a frying pan. She thinks I'm crazy. Maybe I am. Because the haunting didn't stop when I confessed. It didn't stop when they buried Kylie properly in a casket with satin lining. It didn't stop when the judge banged his gavel. It just changed. I don't see her in the corner anymore. I don't see the girl in the gray hoodie with the broken neck. She doesn't need to scare me anymore. She won. She got justice. Now I hear Sierra, not the real Sierra who is rotting in a cell 3 hours away. I hear the Sierra in my head, the voice that told me to grab the shovel, the voice that told me to count to 3. Sometimes when I'm lying on my cot staring at the concrete ceiling, I can feel her weight on the mattress beside me. I can smell her perfume, that expensive floral scent that masked the smell of blood. "You're weak, Riley," the voice whispers. "You were always the follower. You didn't kill her because you hated her. You killed her because you loved me more than you feared God." And she's right. That is the true horror story. It's not about ghosts. It's not about jump scares. It's about how easy it is to lose your soul when you hand it over to someone else for safekeeping. I wanted to be chosen. I wanted to be special. And in the end, I became infamous. I spend my days in the prison library. I read books about redemption, about forgiveness. But I know those words aren't for me. You can't wash blood off your hands when it's stained your DNA. Sometimes I get letters, fan mail. That's the sickest part. There are people out there, girls mostly, who think what we did was edgy, who think Sierra's cool. They send me drawings of knives. They ask me what it felt like. I rip them up. I flush them down the toilet. But last week I got a letter that was different. It had no return address. The envelope was pink. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a letter, it was a drawing. It was a drawing of a stick figure girl lying in the woods. And standing over her were 2 other stick figures. One held a knife, the other held a shovel. Underneath, written in jagged, familiar handwriting, were 3 words. "I'm still cold." I don't know if it's a prank. I don't know if Sierra found a way to send it from her prison, or if it came from somewhere else, somewhere deeper. I keep the letter under my pillow. It reminds me of the truth. The truth is, we are never truly alone. So listen to me closely. This isn't just a story to scare you while you scroll through your phone in the dark. This is a mirror. Look at your friends. Look at the people you trust with your secrets. Look at the girl who sits next to you in history class, the one who laughs at your jokes, the one who shares her location with you. You think you know her. You think you know her heart. I thought I knew Sierra. Kylie thought she knew us. She thought the worst thing we could do was talk behind her back. She never imagined that the hands that braided her hair would be the same hands that held the knife. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. It doesn't always have red eyes and sharp teeth. Sometimes evil has a best friend necklace that matches yours. Sometimes evil drives a silver sedan and listens to pop music. Sometimes evil is just a bored teenager waiting for a signal. Tonight when you turn off this video, when the room goes dark, do me a favor. Check your phone. Is there a text from your best friend? Are they asking you to hang out? Are they asking you to sneak out to go for a drive? To go somewhere quiet? Somewhere dark, just the two of you? Ask yourself, do you have a lighter? Because if they start counting, 1, 2, 3, it's already too late.